In today's episode, we'll put together a small city pond using some low-cost do-it-yourself water effects that you can get from your local Dollar Tree. So one of the boards that I had planned was going to have this rather large open area, a simple little road with a little section coming off. I didn't quite know what to do with the large open space, and I thought, why not? Let's put together a little pond. So I made all the city plazas off camera, got them all textured and scribed out. Now we need to set up our little pond, and I want it to be roughly this same size. So we're going to use this little section as a template for where we're going to do some cutting. So to do the cutting, I'm going to use a simple little X-Acto knife. I also got this from the Dollar Tree, so you can get a whole lot of nice little craft supplies there at very low cost. And to make sure everything kind of lines up correctly, I'm going to use the one other section of plaza just kind of as a guide to make sure that I'm cutting in the right places. Alright, so there we've got an extra section, which I'll use in a different section of the city board. Now this is going to make a nice little carve out that's going to be a once you translate it into D&D tabletop terms, it's going to be a roughly 20 foot by 40 foot pond. So it's going to be a nice little extra feature to add into our little city. Alright, so now that I've got these three kind of situated down, we're not going to glue down the large plaza section just yet. Before we do that, I'm going to carve out our little pond area. And I'm doing that with just a simple hot wire tool. Make sure you do stuff like this in a well-ventilated area. You definitely do not want to be breathing this in. Now, because of the pieces that I'm going to be using, once I get this cut out, I'm going to trim the edges and make the hole just a little bit wider so that we have a little bit of extra room to work with. Now, the pieces that I'm going to use to actually make the insert for the pond are approximately 1/4 inch thick. So I'm trimming just a little bit out to kind of mimic the thickness of the pieces that I'm going to use. Alright, now that the hole has been cut out, let's go ahead and build our pond. So I'm going to be using a couple of different texture rollers for this, and some little bit of heat with a heat gun, and the foam that I'm using is some 1/4 inch thick XPS foam. And I'm just heating up a little bit and then rolling the texture on, heating, rolling. For the bottom of the pond, I'm going to be using this kind of flagstone texture. I like it, and I think it will look pretty good at the bottom of the pond. And then for the sides, I've got a few strips that I've cut to just over 1.5 inches in thickness. It'll give me a little room to trim. And I'm using the same kind of wall texture that I've been using throughout the project so far. And again, it's heat a little, roll, heat, and roll. Now, the firmer you press with the texture rollers with the heat like this, the more of an impression and texture you're going to get, but be a little cautious that you don't damage your texture rollers. This one that I'm using started to get a few chips broken out of it. Alright, so now that I've got everything and it's all been trimmed down to fit the size of the hole, I'm just going to situate everything in place with a little bit of hot glue. Now, because we're going to be using some water effects, you want a very good seal. Now, because the surrounding foam board is completely solid and intact. The only places that we're going to have any kind of leakage is out the bottom. So once everything is in place, I'm going to completely coat the bottom and any of the seams with some hot glue just to make sure that nothing will spill out. Alright, there are our sides. Now for the bottom, I'm going to have to do a little bit of trimming just to make sure everything fits flush. And you'll see here I do a lot of checking, making sure, trimming, and then rechecking and then retrimming. But everything does end up fitting quite nicely, and I secure it in place with just a little bit of hot glue. And then, like I said, I coat everything on the bottom to make sure that there's no exposed seams, and all the water effects should stay inside the pond while I'm working on it. Alright, now that the pond is in place, I can fit down the last plaza section, which is the largest section that's going to go down. And again, I'm fitting it all down with a little bit of Liquid Nails all-purpose adhesive. It takes a little bit for this to dry, but once it does, the pieces are solidly on there and they will not come off. And that's really what I want to go with, just because this board is going to see a lot of wear and tear and a lot of use on the table. And then I'll do the same process to fit down the roads. Now, in the previous boards, I've added a sewer grate or a manhole cover. I'm going to apply a couple of sewer grating just in the gutters on this one, but I'm not going to apply the manhole cover because I don't want there to be the exact same elements on every single board. I want there to be a little bit of variation. Alright, now that that's done, let's go ahead and do some painting. So off camera I painted the plaza and the roads. I'm just going to showcase painting up the little pond section. I did a base coat in some black, and then I'm going to kind of overbrush on some Artist Loft gray just to give that nice stone coloration while still maintaining all of the deeper recesses in a dark kind of grout color. Once that's dry, I do a dry brush of some neutral gray just to pick up all of the edges and some of the texture highlights. Now you can absolutely stop right here and just have this coloration, but I wanted to take it a step further before going into the water effects, just to give a little bit of extra something before we add our liquids. So using a little bit of cerulean blue, I'm going to very lightly dry brush on just a little bit on the lower half of the sides and very lightly on all of the bottom of the pond. This will give the impression of deep water, since the only time water is blue is when there's a large body of it. And this will give the impression that it's a nice blue pool of water. Alright, so now that that's prepped, we can go ahead and start applying our water. Now, I said I got this from the Dollar Tree, and that is accurate, but I'm going to show you a quick little experiment that I did. This is some Elmer's clear glue. You can find this kind of in the little craft or school supplies section. It is clear and it dries clear, which is a really nice thing for effects like this. Now, an early experiment I tried was mixing in just a little bit of the cerulean blue to see if I could tint the glue a color, and then just pour it into place. And while this did work, it did color the glue, you can see it really was a little too solid of a color. It wasn't really transparent. And while that is nice, I thought, well, that isn't quite what I'm going for, so I thought, well, maybe if I water it down a little bit with a little bit more glue, that will help. And it kind of did, until I mixed it up together again, and then it all just kind of had the same coloration. Now this might work if you had a huge amount of glue that you were going to color and used a small amount of the paint, but didn't quite work out the way I was hoping, and I'll have to experiment with this exact method a little bit later and probably figure out some better ways to do it. You can kind of see if this was a huge, deep pool and I didn't care about seeing the bottom, this would work, but it's not going to work for what I'm trying to achieve on the board. So, not a fail, but not the effect that I want. So, having learned that lesson, we're going to take a little bit of the Elmer's glue, and I just applied roughly half to 2/3 of the bottle into the little pond space. And as you can see, the glue is going in nicely. It's clear, it has a nice little shine on the top of it, and it really has that appearance that it's nice blue water with the dry brushing that we did underneath. And now we're going to let this sit until it fully dries and cures. Okay, so it's been a little over 24 hours since I poured this, and as you can see, it's relatively dry. I can press my hands into the surface, but we have all this texture, and the lower layers are still really liquidy. Now, I was hoping for, you can kind of see it on this side over here, I was hoping for more of this, where it's, okay, that's still very wet, where it's more solid and just kind of flat, but we ended up with this. So that is a fail as far as that experiment goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean all of this out, and we're going to try something a little bit different. I think what we're going to do is put a layer of glue, just like a thin layer, let that solidify, then do another layer, let it solidify, another layer, let it solidify, and we'll see if that works. So yeah, this is going to be real messy and probably take some time, so I'm not going to film this part. Alright, so it has been a couple of days now. I did 3 layers of glue. You can see it pretty decently here. So what I did was a layer of glue, and then I let that dry, and then I did another layer, let that dry, and this is the 3rd layer. You can see it's mostly solid. There's a little bit of tackiness. Well, it's not really tacky, but there's a little bit of give to it. This will probably be fully solidified in another 3-4 hours. It's not a fast process, but it is a good process, and it does work. Alright, and that is episode number 4 finished. Alright, so here we are. The pond is finished and fully dried. I like how it adds a little bit of extra element to the city. Definitely kind of breaks up the monotony of the plazas and the city buildings. So, definitely worth the wait. This took about 3 days for it to fully set and cure for all the layers, but it was a very cheap process. I think I spent maybe $8 total for all of the glue that I used, even including the little mistake that I made. So thank you everyone for watching. Please hit that like button, subscribe for future content, comment down in the comments section, and we will see everyone next episode.